right, well, hello everyone. Glad to see everybody's able to make it for our second initiative here. What is the official name of this session?
Navigating the transaction.
Navigating the transaction. We had it, I think it was called Your First Deal last time. We're now calling it Navigating the Transaction. So we're going to be walking step by step what it looks like to get started, going through a complete closing, what to do even after closing, and we have more or less a timeline. So as I go through today, I want everyone to have their notes ready, and I'll be giving you dates of like 0 to 5 days and 7 to 10 days. Have a timeline so that you can understand when you should be doing these items, and we can walk you through that. For chats, I'm going to see if I can open up chats on here, and perfect. So go ahead and type in your chats if you have questions. If you're on Zoom, if you're in the room, you can just raise your hand, obviously. So we'll be all set. But why don't we go ahead and get started? Because we've done this before, we can actually get started with just a quick Q&A or anything that you're trying to learn today. And then we can dive a little bit deeper into the timeline. So what questions are you trying to achieve today? What concerns do you have? What fears do you have about a transaction? What is something you had a recent problem with potentially that you wish you would have done differently? We can learn from each other as well. But we can get started there. Seems like everyone is all set, so we can just end right there. So think, what are we trying to learn here today with it? We all came and dedicated the time. We have brand new agents all the way up to experienced agents in the room. So what are we looking to achieve and learn?
I have a question about timelines within the contract. So when you have the ROC sent back over, what's the timeline to receive it back? And if your client no longer wants to move forward with the contract following the ROC, what is the timeline for them to respond?
Sure, we will be going over that. I will give you a quick hitter ahead of time. The answer to your question is 3 days from your last inspection. And then the timeline goes 3 back and forth from there. So if you're listening online, your question was about a removal of contingency. And you're going to be bouncing back and forth between that removal of contingency, which is the exact form stating what your buyer does not want prepared after the home inspection. But it's 3 days from your last inspection. And that's very often confused because we'll have 7 days for a home inspection. But if you do a home inspection on day 1, that means by day 4, you have to have a response. Then it's the other party's job to respond within 3 days. And it keeps going back and forth within 3 days until somebody doesn't respond, and then technically the contract's null and void. That rarely happens. Usually agents are in communication. So.
And then I had a situation, but it took her like 2 weeks to respond, and she essentially didn't want to sign the release for my client to get paid.
The client's concern.
She didn't want to sign the release to release my client for his money. So I didn't know like.
So the answer to that is if the buyer's trying to get out of a contract with each release, and after the home inspection and they did all of their items within their due diligence period, it really, the contract states if they found something that was not disclosed in the property disclosure, they should get their earnest money back, but you're not going to go to the title company with the contract and say, see, I told you so, give me money. You'll have to sign a mutual release, which is what your buyer did. The real answer is they'll have to negotiate that out, or it'll have to go to court, or it'll have to wait 2 years. One of the above. But usually if you press hard enough, or maybe you throw $100 to the seller for their time or something like that, that'll help. But why don't we go ahead and we'll get started with our timeline, and then I'm sure more answers will come up today. And we'll have our title company joining us in a little bit. But I'm Eric Akbar. I'm the productivity coach and a real estate agent. This is Sean Hadley. our amazing loan officer that everybody loves to use. So take his phone number down by the end of today's session, because like he did last night, I had to save one of our clients from a possible challenge. So don't call him at 8 o'clock at night unless it's absolutely necessary. But he's always there for us. So, so the first start that we actually start with is we're going to start with us as a real estate agent. We're going to start off with -10. So take your notes out, go ahead and start typing your timeline. -10 days. And why I am saying -10 is day 0 is going to be our contract acceptance date. Most contracts are always off the acceptance date. Who knows what the acceptance date technically is? Like what tells me that I have an acceptance date? Once both parties sign, that's exactly it. So yeah, that's where we start, is the acceptance date, I should say, is where we start, but that's how we officially know that it's there. So our -10 days is going to be meet with buyer and discuss lender and pre-approval. So you can write that down. -10, meet with buyer, discuss lender and pre-approval. Now, if I'm working with a buyer, it is my job to make sure everything works. If I'm working with a seller, it is my job to make sure everything works. I am not relying on another agent. I'm not relying on another home inspector or lender or whoever it may be. It is my job to make sure that all of this chaos comes together without the buyer or seller knowing that there's chaos happening. There's always chaos behind the scenes. It is not our job to panic the buyer or seller when those items come up. Really important that we understand that. The way we act is the way our buyers and sellers will react. So if we call and say, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened. The appraisal came in $5,000 low. This is ridiculous. It's horrible. We go, hold on. The appraisal came in $5,000 low. And just like Sean does very beautifully, he'll help out and say, hey, this is where our different options are. Here's what the reality looks like, and then resolve the issue. But if we start panicking, so will our buyers. So what I do when I'm worrying about getting a pre-approval, the first thing that I talk about is I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it's great to meet with you. Let's discuss a needs analysis. In coaching, we actually go through a buyer and seller presentation. In that buyer presentation, we go over what a needs analysis looks like. We're going to be asking all the questions of why the buyer is moving, when they have to sell, when they have to buy, so on and so forth. One of those questions I'm going to ask is, I'm curious, are you paying cash, conventional, or are you going FHA? And what do they normally say? We don't know. Now, that's better than saying, are you pre-approved? Why is that better than saying, are you pre-approved? This comes from Don Duracki all the time. He talks about it. He's Sean's partner on the west side. He says that because instead of saying, are you pre-approved, it's almost asking a buyer, like, do you have any money? Yeah. Right? It's a little bit more invasive. Or saying, are you paying conventional, cash, or are you pre-approved? And they say, I don't know. Say, that's a great place for us to start. I'm going to text Sean and, hey, Sean, are you available tomorrow at 2 o'clock to meet with Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? And Sean will say yes or no. Perfect. But I don't just say, here, Mr. Buyer, go get pre-approved through Sean. Here's a phone number. We want to try and put those two individuals together and wrap our arms around them. If you're very close with a client and you trust that they're going to make that outreach find, I'm mainly talking about buyers from open houses, cold leads. That's a great way to show them. Is that valuable to a buyer?
Can you put me a couple of those boxes?
If we can put them together with the lender and actually force that next step. It's a huge value to them because they're afraid. They don't know what bank to talk to. They're usually going to their normal local bank that they have $20,000 in savings with, and they go, oh, I have $20,000 in savings. They're going to give me a great deal. You know, I know all the tellers, and Sally's really nice behind the counter. Just because that happens, Sally behind the counter is not handling their loan. I promise you that. It's probably somebody out of state that's going to be handling. They've never talked with, and will never talk again afterwards. Sean's always going to be here and help us out. So anyways, I talked with the buyer and I texted with Sean. I got them a date. Sean, why don't you come back up as you just sat down? And why don't we talk about what it looks like? I'm handing the buyer off to Sean at this point. Now Sean's going to be discussing what it looks like from the buyer perspective and his perspective on what that interaction looks like. And this is again, -10 days, somewhere in that range.
So let's say, Eric, whether it's a conference call or an email or just, hey, Sean, reach out to John Smith, who I met at an open house this weekend. So very soft conversation, easygoing, going, hey, I understand you met with Eric and you're interested in buying a home. I'd obviously be more than happy to kind of guide you through the process, answer questions. And, oftentimes the question is, well, where do I start from a buyer standpoint? So I use the term pre-qualification and pre-approval. Don Drecke, our partner on the sits in the Rocky River office. Chris Bullock, who also you see popping inside out of my office. We're on call in a sense for you for all your needs, mortgage needs, financing questions. But specifically with the buyer, pre-qualification is the word I use. It's where we get just a basic information about what your income is, where you've been working, what kind of savings you have, or what savings you will have if you're saving up or getting a gift. Take a look at a credit report. It's kind of just, I use the term kind of putting our toe in the water to kind of just feel, okay, let's take a broad brush stroke and see what the finances look like. When that conversation's over, the buyer usually has a pretty good idea if they can buy, at what price point. We get into heavier conversations like not just price point, down payment, closing costs, monthly payments, just to try and establish where the buyer is at.
Let's pause right there. If everyone can write down what he just said, we want to make sure that the buyer is aware of, you said purchase price,
Monthly down payment,
monthly payment,
closing costs.
closing costs. You can put next to closing costs, who is paying them? In this market, it's going to be the buyer. No questions asked on that one. In the future, when the market does settle down, and it is possible still today, it's rare, you could ask the seller to pay closing costs. We're going to talk about why that's possible. That's very hard to get a seller to do today, even when they can net potentially more money from the offer. The way it's written, there's a reason why sellers will still say there's, or at least a smart agent on the other side will see through that and go, that's probably not possible. One other item I do discuss with buyers at this point when I'm having them talk with the lender is I'm asking them, what is their target monthly payment? Not what their target purchase price is. Because as we have seen recently, purchase prices have gone up a little bit, but monthly payments have gone up a decent amount with interest rates. And we've been telling buyers for the last 2 or 3 years now, you have a steal of deal because your house is so cheap, your interest is so cheap. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually put together their principal, which is their purchase price that they're paying, and then I'll calculate their interest over 30 years. And if they are planning on staying there 30 years or 5 years or whatever it is, that's their total amount they're paying. That's different. And I'll give them an example of like, hey, if rates went up to X price, or if rates went down, if this is how your purchase price adjusts, right? We're not just negotiating purchase price, we're negotiating interest with time, more or less. But sorry to cut you off there, Sean, but I wanted to make sure that they were aware exactly what the buyer needs to see.
Yeah, a lot of times this conversation with the pre-qualification, sometimes we establish, okay, we're not in a position to buy yet. Here's what we need to do, whether it's a work situation or maybe credit that we're getting repaired, need to do some, work on. And I'll follow up with Eric too, just to say, hey, here's the situation, not ready to buy now, but another 90 days or 180 days. And he can set the urgency and put them on his calendar. Well, the customer, sometimes the conversation goes great. If you're looking for a $200,000 house, well, great, you're qualified for a $200,000 house. Here's what the monthly payment is, $1,600 or whatever it is. And they're, like, oh, wait a second, I didn't want to pay more than $1,200. This is the right time to have that conversation, not after you've shown them $200,000 houses for 3 weeks in a row, and then find out this is performance. So the pre-qualification is a big education for a lot of buyers. And the next step from there is a pre-approval. It's basically just taking one half step further, everything we just chatted about. We ask for W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, in some cases, tax returns, divorce decrees. With this information, now we're able to validate it and actually issue a pre-approval letter. Pre-approval letter carries a bit more weight. It doesn't say I just had a conversation. It says I've had somebody look at all this information, verify it, and this letter actually means something. The way I sell, I don't know if that's the best word, but a pre-approval. But if I'm a realtor and buyer's like, well, I don't really want to get pre-approved just yet. The pre-approval isn't just your ticket to open doors. I mean, in a sense that's a big part of it, but If a buyer's pre-approved with us at least, you know, the buyers, in addition to having that certificate, they're gonna know what they needed, you know, for a down payment, what they're gonna need at closing for closing costs, what their monthly payment is. They're gonna have an idea of the process as opposed to just, you know, learning from friends, family, and Google. So that's where that's big when it comes in.
How long is a pre-approval letter?
So pre-approval
Before it expires, you know?
with us, it's based on the date of the credit report. The credit report's good for 120 days. Some lenders might only be good for 90 days, some 60, but 120 days is the norm. There's no cost for pre-approval with us, and frankly, with most lenders. But yeah, 120 days is the norm. And everyone gets pushed back, oh, I don't want to have too many people looking at my credit report. And that's true. You don't want to have too many inquiries in your credit report, you know, for any reason necessarily. But for mortgages, you have a shopping window. Depending on which web page you look at, and if you look at the government CFPB web page, they say 45 days. If three banks and lenders look at your credit report in a 2-week period, it only counts as one hit against your score. So the better idea is if you're going to get, you know, more than one pre-approval, do it closer together. That way the inquiries don't hurt. But that's something consumer generally isn't aware of.
And my question is, okay, how about they end up saying, you say 120 days, but we haven't found anything right then. Since I'm with you, you can have the record, you can still extend it.
It's easy out. Basically, I just received the text right before we started here going, haven't found a house, you know, of course. What do I need to extend it? So I just texted her back, your permission to pull a new credit report. I'll have to just get some updated pay stubs and bank statements, and you know, I'll probably have those later tonight, have it updated that way.
One other thing to be aware of, and I tell buyers this all the time too, the pre-approvals are only as good as really two main items. There's a lot more behind it, but if interest rates go up and they're shopping, let's say they're pre-approved for 150,000, 150,000 could be a tough price range in today's market. If all of a sudden interest rates go up 1%, they're no longer approved for $150,000. Also, if they go out and go buy a brand new car the next day, and they want to get pre-approved and all of a sudden their debt to income changes, that's a different item as well. So be aware and inform your buyers, like make sure you're not doing any purchases once you get that pre-approval. Don't do any big finance changes. If you're thinking about changing a job, thinking about changing anything, they need to be discussing that with Sean before making any type of moves.
That's
If you're in
one
this
more
business long,
You know, once you said, you know, a person can be approved for 250,000, but then they want to show the seller that they've been approved for 200,000. You don't approve of that, right?
I think it's a horrible, I've said this always. There's never been a seller that I've sat down with and said, wait a second, Eric, they're pre-approved for 250 and we're selling our house for 225. We want to have them pay 250 for our home. No, the stronger your buyer looks to a seller, the better off. If you can get $1 million pre-approval, get $1 million pre-approval.
And show it to the seller.
Show it to the seller, yeah, and say, look, I've got a buyer that's more than well qualified. Those sellers aren't going, oh, I want $1 million for my house now. They're just saying they're
They
a
don't
good
do
qualified
that.
buyer.
Okay.
Yeah, we can modify the letter as needed, but I generally, in this market especially, I lean towards that strategy.
Very good. So how long does it take for once a buyer submits all their docs and gets everything to you? How long does it typically take on a normal basis?
We shoot for pre-approvals for 24 hours, but to a couple of things. First off, it can be longer, especially if, you know, a lot of buyer thinks they gave me all the documents and they're missing some or many, or if somebody's self-employed and they own rental properties, sometimes it takes a bit longer to go through. So I typically say 24, 48 hours, usually we're within that. Sometimes it's a bit longer if the buyer, you know, circumstances are a little different. We also do have a kind of an upgraded, I don't know what this would, a little bit more intense pre-approval. We call it our fast track pre-approval. This is where we collect all the information, fully process the file and submit the file to underwriting, which is a bit more formal, a bit more official, carries a little bit more weight as a buyer. But we have to have all documents. If a buyer is getting a gift for the down payment, it has to be in their account. Can't be, you know, received at closing. If a buyer is paying off a few debts or a buyer's, you know, switching jobs, that all has to be done. So that one takes probably a good week. But again, that one, we're going to put the buyer through the process as if they were already under contract. No cost for that either.
Now, because Sean has such a great calm tonality, I don't think a lot of you understood the weight of what he just said. You have a lot of value by getting them, having a fully underwritten loan, practically, I shouldn't say fully, a partially underwritten loan prior to closing. How quickly can you close a loan that's on after fast track?
We've closed them in under 10 days before. Title companies on the spot, appraisers got to get out there quick, but it gives more, the whole offer is pretty much set in stone, or I should say the financing is set in stone, subject to insurance, homeowners insurance, title insurance, appraisal.
And potentially if the buyer has a large down payment, the appraisal could even be waived. That's a substantial, I'm talking probably 30% more, 30% or more, that they would need to do something like that. And it's a case-by-case scenario. If you're looking to help somebody out who has been struggling at an open house for buying a house, they go, I've offered on 5 other homes with my agent, I can't get anywhere. Plug them in with Sean, say get into a fast track loan, and your offer is practically as good as cash. We have a fully underwritten loan. I'm sure Sean or Chris would be willing to make the call to the other agent and say, hey, this loan can close in blank days. Maybe it's 2 weeks for a certain buyer, maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's 3 weeks, but Sean will make that call at that time. I don't recommend this across the board because we're just going to overwhelm cross country with a bunch of buyers. But if you're like, hey, there's a buyer that this could really genuinely help, and they've been struggling because of A, B, and C reasons, that will accelerate. Think about it from the seller standpoint. All of a sudden, the seller is like, wait a second, I have a deal that'll close in 2.5 weeks with a fully underwritten pre-approval. That's against cash. Like there's not, and especially if there's an appraisal waiver, like I might take as a seller the fast track loan over cash in certain scenarios. All of the terms are the same, it would probably be cash. But if you don't have inspections and the other agent does, you might be able to win the deal because you brought them to Sean. Great way to be a value proposition. A lot of agents ask me, Eric, what can I do that's any different from any other agent? There's one. You're going to pick up a lot more of these little items that you can use as a tool that makes you a different agent than just somebody who I think Sean referred to as somebody who just opens doors. Or that's not what our value is here. We have to be advising and helping. Perfect. So once that conversation ends, where are we going from there?
So pre-qualification, say, here's what you need to get pre-approved. Let's do X, Y, and Z. We get that information. They've got a pre-approval letter in hand. Now, I'm going to communicate with the realtor each stage. Hey, reached out to them, haven't heard back. Hey, spoke with them. Looks like they qualify for 200. Their comfort level is 160. We're working on a pre-approval. Hey, Eric, good news. They're pre-approved. Here's the letter that says so. Keep me posted. Hey, buyer, let me know how the house hunt is going. And that's what the communication typically is ongoing. My big thing is, I always tell people, some buyers expect, and lenders, the only time you hear from them is, here's your pre-approval letter, call me when you're under contract. I'm big into, hey, let's communicate. If you're worried about that monthly payment, you want to know what's going on with interest rates, always feel free to reach out. And by the way, I may kind of keep in the loop with you, keep in touch with you if I don't hear from you regardless. So.
Yeah, very good. Last thing from this stage, what are mistakes that they want to stay away from?
If you're doing in this business long enough, someone will quit their job before closing. They will go buy a car. They will, do some goofy stuff, even though we tell them again and again, don't switch jobs, or if you are, just let your lender know exactly what's happening as soon as it happens. If you've got to buy a new car or make a big purchase, let the lender know right away, because it may impact the loan, may impact the interest rate. It has several different factors. And then no new credit. Trying to avoid any credit inquiries. Had somebody who, literally the day of closing, we got an alert, GS, a credit inquiry. I don't remember what GS stands for. That's Apple. They went and bought an Apple computer, and now they had a $200 payment. We literally are at the table signing papers, and we've got to send the file back on your way. Thankfully, they could qualify with it, but they had to drop what they're doing. They had to do a credit verification. It was a bummer. I've had those exact same scenarios with Ashley Home Furniture and Home Depot, and they had to go pay it off before we could go and close the loan. So that's some really crazy stuff.
Self-inquiry still.
Self-inquiries don't count. So if you're looking at your own credit, annualcreditreport.com, I encourage customers to go through there on their own. They used to be able to get their credit report free once a year. Now you can do it once a week because of COVID. Thank goodness for COVID.
There you go. So yeah, we are, one other thing that I would recommend, so we don't have those challenges at 8 PM with Sean, tell those buyers, set up a meeting with Sean ahead of time. And actually set that time up, because if you, again, just say, here's Sean's number, good luck. If you say, hey, can you meet him tomorrow at 2, or can you email him the docs by such and such date? That's going to allow you to make an offer on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock without hesitation, versus going, I don't know if Sean's with his kids at a baseball game and he's going to be pulling out his laptop and trying to get this buyer pre-approved. Let's try and get ahead of that. Now, I promise you, not every buyer will do that. We can make an effort to keep it away from that. So that's another thing that we intend to do with all of our buyers, get them ahead of the game on all of that, not wait until. So, especially in today's market, literally it could be hours that your buyer has an opportunity window to make an offer at. And if they don't have it within those hours, and Sean is not available as he is, he can't be available at all times. So, all right, so I think we're all set with the pre-approval and all of that. Sean, anything else you want to add before we bring you up later?
No, just don't forget about the lunch part of lunch and learn. Nobody's eating.
I see 3 closed boxes. Sorry, Zoom.
Someone raise their hand on Zoom there.
Let me get to the Zoom here. Go ahead and unmute
Yeah, I
yourself.
got a question about when we make recommendations for mortgage, like companies. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So if we're making recommendations for like 3 companies, is it okay if we just send over Sean's information alone, or do we still need to do the at least 3 recommendations? Sorry if you already covered it. I was late.
Yeah, I'm okay with just sending over Sean's number. If you have a lender that you work with that you're preferring, that's fine as well. They just have to be in good hands, is my main concern. Home inspectors is something I recommend heavily on having 3 separate ones, specifically because they're the ones that can really, if you have a buyer that doesn't get a good home inspection done and they find a lot of problems afterwards, they're going to be going, how are you related to that home inspector? Lenders, we don't see that. And I know that their best interest is to go to Sean, not only for rates and terms and all of that, but also the quality. It's really important to have a quality person that's going to be able to respond quickly, that's going to be able to put out fires. And also, cross-country is phenomenal at figuring out problems before they exist. There's an old saying in the industry that it takes, what's the old saying, Sean? It takes like 1 day for a banker to say yes and 30 days to say no. You'll hear often, I say this in the investing session I do all the time. If you're trying to get a good lender, the last person you want is to call up a bank and call the lender that just goes, yeah, no problems, go ahead and apply here. That's what banks are told to do. Like, just apply, and then we'll figure it out later. Sean's gonna look through the file and go, hey, I see you've only been employed for a year and a half. This is going to be a challenge, and we have to figure out how we're going to overcome that now if that's a problem. So that's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Okay, let's keep going here. So I know I'm kind of going backwards, but from day 9 to negative day 9 to negative day 11. So you can even go a little bit into the past more if you had to. That's our buyer presentation. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because we do that in coaching. But like I said, you're going to be going into a needs analysis. You're going to give them your value proposition during this. Like, what can you actually help this person with? You can go into reviewing a purchase agreement with them. This is where your job as a realtor comes up. If you want to talk about how to get a lot of buyers, one way that you can capture a lot of buyers from an open house is say, I assume you would probably want to review a purchase agreement and understand that before you actually write an offer, right? Perfect. Why don't we go sit down for a cup of coffee and review what a purchase agreement looks like? It's educating a buyer. You can educate them on a property disclosure. You can educate them in many, many different ways. But that's going to be, again, negative 9 to negative 11 days. Negative 8 to negative 2 days is going to be when we show homes. Showing homes is going to be pretty simple, but I'll give you a couple of notes. Number 1, if you're brand new to the industry, make sure you download Showing Time. That's how you're going to actually show homes. I don't think I've ever had to teach anybody how to use showing time. It's so simple. You just type in the address and say what time you want to go. Pretty simple, and they'll text you back. Number two, make sure you have a note-taking method for buyers. You might be walking through 5 homes in a normal market. In today's market, you're walking through maybe 1 or 2 homes at most in a day. In 2010, though, I was showing 10 to 15 homes in one day to one couple, and then at night maybe showing another 3 or 4 to somebody else. And they all didn't want any of those. They would wait for tomorrow. Today, you show one house and they're like, all right, I'll give you 20,000 over asking. Will that work? And it's like, nope, move on to the next one. So that's what we want to pay attention to, though, is taking notes, because they may have 5 questions at that house. And you might go, oh, I'll remember those questions. Not only that, are they worried about the big pile of tires in the backyard that aren't removed? And they go, are those going to be removed? And you'll go, I'll check with the agent. You shoot a text to the agent and they never respond. You write a purchase agreement, they go to close and you're like, oh no, that big pile of tires is still there. My system, and I recommend this system, email yourself while you're at the listing. It does 2 things. It's a great system, and 2, it shows that you care about your client. Every question counts. If they're concerned about when the carpet was replaced, type it in there. Not so much because it matters. Does it really matter if the carpet was replaced 1 month ago or 3 months ago? Probably not. There's no value difference there. If the buyer cares about it, though, we need to be caring about it as well. It'll show a great way of adding value to your client. When you are showing, this is again for the newer agents, I do no more than 2 homes per hour. If they're all within like 1 condominium development, you can possibly push 3 or even 4 within an hour, but it depends on the pace of your client. Some clients love to sit around and talk and ask a million questions about, types of countertops or something. Most buyers, though, I would say it takes 10 to 15 minutes per house and you're moving on. Another misconception from a seller, though, is if a buyer only stays in a house for 5 minutes, they're not interested. That's not true. I was in a house last night for 10 minutes that a buyer was making an offer on. Sometimes buyers are just moving quickly. Some buyers are just high Ds, don't care about the small details. They know what they want to know. They've already checked it out online. They're just getting the main items hit when they walk through. All right, day -1, we're going to be making an offer. What does that tell us if day -1 we're making an offer? How long does it take to negotiate then? Typically 24 hours. If you are great, I would recommend trying to negotiate within hours in today's market. One big tip in today's market I can give you, and I was super close if my buyers would have taken my recommendation and they went against my recommendation, and that's fine. They understood the risk involved with it. If you can negotiate, though, the same day that the house hits the market or as quickly as possible, you have probably a 3 times higher likelihood of getting an offer accepted. And I'll give you an example why. That's in this market. Right now, almost every seller is listing their home, and then what are they saying, do you think? Let's wait until. Let's just wait for a couple of days and see, right? We don't want to take the first offer on the plate. We're going to wait a couple of days. That puts your buyer in a horrible position because your buyer is offering up against 5, maybe 10, maybe 15 other offers. And it's likely that yours is not going to be accepted if you're up against 10 or 15 offers. Day 1, last night when I made that offer, I was the only one on the table. And my buyer said, why don't I think about it overnight? And then, they're not accepting offers. It says in the MLS till Tuesday. Well, guess what? I can make an offer so great that we get the offer accepted right away. And we've done that multiple times for clients. And I'll give you an example. I listed a house recently for $400,000. I'm on the listing side on this one. I listed it for $400,000. When I first talked to the client, he bought it for like 190 or 200, like 4 years ago from me, 5 years ago from me. When we first put that house, when I called him, when he first told me I'm thinking about selling, I told him that his number would probably start with a 4. And he goes, absolutely not, Eric, because there's no way you can sell my house for over 400,000. We ended up selling it for well above 400,000, and he's shocked. The point being is if we had our first offer come through at 380, he would have probably accepted it. Yet there were probably offers that were much higher, and I told him and advised him accordingly on how to accept these offers. Yet, if you're a great agent, you can be that agent submitting 380 and saying, look, I'll give it to you today, and here's how we're going to strategize if you don't accept it today. The way we do that is we add in escalation clauses the day after. I got another one accepted in Mentor. House was listed for 280. We offered 320. We said though 320 is good until midnight tonight. Starting tomorrow, though, we're going to use an escalation clause. What does that do to the seller? Puts them in the mindset that if they don't accept it tonight, they'll still get 320 for the house possibly, but only if there's another offer that comes in higher, or bumping that escalation clause up to 320. If you don't know what escalation clauses are, that pretty much says that you're going to start off at purchase price of 280 in that example, and then beat out any additional offer by $2,000. So they would need another offer at 318 to still get their 320. I also made the offer so great with high earnest money, no inspections, all of these things, and I do that very cautiously, and I don't recommend that for everyone. If you don't know what you're looking at in a house and don't have a background on construction, be very careful about offering, especially in older homes without home inspections. Buyers need to know what they're having, what they're walking into. But by putting that in there, we were able to win the offer that night. Like within 10 minutes of us signing it and getting it sealed, the agent said they got another offer for higher than what we had it offered at, and they still had 2 more days left to still make offers. Now we shut it down quickly. That's how you win offers, but don't let your buyers sit around and go, well, I'll think about it. So anyways, typically during negotiations, you're reviewing the purchase agreements. Always, always, always go through your purchase agreements with your buyers on .loop. They will sign anything you put in front of them. They have no idea what they're signing. It sounds great from a sales position. I'm telling you, it is the worst thing. I watch many agents not explain to them what earnest money is. They don't explain to them what when loan application is, when possession dates and closing dates are. If you're not reviewing these items with your clients, they're not going to understand it. So make sure, just take 10 minutes to go through it. You don't have to be in person. You can send it on .loop and say, hey, you have 10 minutes to review. Here's what line 10, 15, 100, 120 means. Hit the main bullet points, but not just purchase price. Same thing with sellers. Okay, so congratulations, we're under contract. We are now on day 0 and day 1. So that's your next note. So, so when we're on day 0 and day 1, we do something in coaching called Magic 6. That is a more or less a checklist that I am going to give you right now that you should be checking on and going through these specific items. Whose job is this? It's your job. As an agent, everything that I ask you, whose job is this? It's gonna be your job. Okay? And you can just memorize that. Make sure that it's being done. So the first item that we have to do, we've negotiated. Sometimes negotiation can take 3, 4, 5 days. And things can get lost in translation. I want you to regroup and understand exactly what that means. Take a moment, review the contract, and review your buyer and seller checklist. In .loop or DocuSign, whatever you're using is a buyer and seller checklist. You need to make sure your escrow letter is out. You need to make sure that your home warranty form has been filled out. You need to make sure all the checklists have been done. Also, make sure that we are signing everything that we need to be signing, including the buyer side or the other side. Do you have a missing initial? When do missing initials normally come up? It's when our commissions are getting cut and our front office is saying, guess what? You can't get paid until you get an initial on page 7 of whatever form. Get this signed. Now the deal has closed. How do you think you're going to look once you give keys to your buyer and you go back 3 days later and go, hey, I need you to sign one more thing. And they're like, what do you mean? I already have keys to my house. So we do this now, not later. By the way, you can write down next to Magic 6, check this daily until all items are done. I've had agents go, well, Eric, I did the checklist and I sent everything out to the other agent. I sent everything out to fill in the blank and I'm all done. It's like, nope, not until you have confirmation. Next item is you're going to send the contract and escrow letter. You can put that in specifically to the title company. And I think that's a great segue to get Jade up here. So Jade from GM Title is here. to walk us through what her role is and what GM Title's role is. Yeah, we'll start from there. So you're the title company.
Yes.
I have a buyer. We just went under contract. I'm sending you a contract. What else do you want from me as an agent?
I would say contract, make sure all Ts are crossed, Is are dots, especially, you know, like you said, on those initial pages, make sure everything is completed. Number one, information that we don't have that we need is contact information. So whether you guys are sending the contract in or the other party, make sure that title has both sets of contact information. I understand you guys don't want to put it on there for, you know, you don't want the other agent contacting you, you know, your clients and stuff, but we do need that information. That is the way we process our information is, you know, we reach out to both buyer and seller to get, you know, certain or loan numbers for mortgages, HOA information, things of that nature that allow us to process our file completely. So contact information, I would say, is the most forgotten part of the information.
What contact information do you want? Name, address?
Name, phone number, and email,
Name,
ultimately.
phone number, email.
So basic.
Just so that they can reach out. Now, something that we should also trigger in our mind at this point, one of the first phone calls we get as soon as GM Title reaches out to our clients is, Eric, who is GM Title? Even though we have talked with them, they don't remember all the time that there's a title company involved. They don't know what a title company typically is. So make sure you're telling the buyer when you're signing a contract, hey, GM Title will be reaching out to you or whichever title is handling the transaction. And hey, there's going to be some pre-closing documents sent to them. This is again, probably day 0 to day 5. Those pre-closing docs are going to be general information about if they're married, if they're not married, all sorts of you know, social security numbers, private information, as well as what's called closing protection coverage, which is a huge question we get. Jay, tell us more what closing protection coverage is and the difference between that and title insurance.
So closing protection coverage is extra insurance on any fraudulent activity with money when it's in the title company's possession. So before I go into it, I'm going to stem what it comes from because a lot of people, their little red flags go up when I say it. So it stems from the recession of 2008. What was happening is for title companies, we're a third-party company who pretty much is in charge of the money of a transaction, I would say is the, you know, the easiest way to put it. So in 2008, when the recession hit, a lot of title companies were holding money for point of sales, for liens that they were holding, for any money that needed to be held in escrow. And what was happening was the title companies were closing down and they still had the customers' funds in escrow. And so that is extra protection for any fraudulent activity, or if we were to close our doors to money tomorrow, and we had any money in our accounts that belong to you, your monies would be safe. So it is optional coverage. It is not a requirement to get. And for sellers, it's $55. And then for the buyer, it's extra $20.
Yeah, so the buyers and sellers can opt for it or opt against it. It's completely up to them, but that's the difference. That's not title insurance. So what is title insurance?
Title insurance is pretty much a title company it's protection against any previous sellers that have liens on the properties are entitled to any part of your property because of an estate or trust or anything like that. It really protects your biggest investment for anybody coming after your property before it was yours.
Okay, very good. I have one thought. Oh, keep in mind, title companies are licensed by the state, and they're also they're handling, if there's a $350,000 sale, they get $350,000 approximately from the buyer's bank that will be in their bank account. GM Title is not going anywhere. If you're using some who knows what title company from out of state, you might want to consider what you're doing and getting that insurance protection. So the file's been handed off to you from the title company's perspective and the buyer's perspective. What are you doing behind the scenes?
From there, we are doing a plethora of things. We're ordering the deeds, we're ordering any payoffs, we're making sure that there is no child support liens, IRS tax liens, state of Ohio liens, or mechanics liens on title. Those are things that will have to be paid off. So if there is any of those things, we work with attorneys, buyers, sellers in order to receive that payoff. We'll also make sure that if it's city water and sewer does follow the property, not the person. So we make sure that water and sewer is then paid. The worst thing is when you move into a new house, you get a $4,000 water sewer bill because the sellers haven't paid it in years. So that is something extra we do that is actually, just so you guys know, if you are using another title company, that is not something that is required. That is something extra GM Title does. So if you get a feeling that water and sewer haven't been paid, please bring that up with other title companies. With GM Title, it is our standard practice. We do that with every deal, but not every company does.
So you're checking with Cleveland Water prior to
Yes.
closing.
Yep, or whatever city is handling it
What's the largest water bill you've heard of?
for the 4,500.
How do you think your buyers would feel if they walked into a deal? Pretty easy just to hand it over to GM Title and have that conversation. Once it transfers title, do you think that seller's gonna come back and go, oh, I'll pay the water bill now?
Yeah.
Good luck. They're gone, they're in white. So checking that beforehand is super important. I think from the buyer perspective, you don't have any right to call the Cleveland Water and ask them if there's an outstanding bill. You should be able to. Good luck calling Cleveland Water.
That really depends on who answers the phone, I'm gonna be honest with you.
Absolutely.
There is no rhyme or reason. Sometimes they'll give you it, and sometimes they're like, no, you need to send in the request with the authorization. So really, it's just determined who answers the phone.
Exactly. What are other major problems that you see either from an agent or from a buyer that they have missed that makes your job easier if it's done ahead of time?
I would say contact information, number one thing. If you have a common name, something with, let's name, Kyle Jones, something like that, a very common name, let us make us aware of it. Give us the socials up front. If it is a common name, more times than not, there is going to be multiple leads that are gonna come up just because we can't differentiate this Kyle Jones from the next Kyle Jones. So if we have social securities, the proper information up front, and we're aware of it, we can eliminate those leads ASAP rather than going back and forth, sending information back and forth. We have, we'll give it to the examiner. Hey, if there's socials attached to this, eliminate this one from it.
Now, you're like a title company. I went to the title bureau and bought a car recently. I just went there the same day and they just swapped out the title real quick. Is that how it works with you guys?
Absolutely not. So what we do once we get a contract is we enter it in our system and it goes out for a 42-year search on the property. The search takes probably, I would say, about 5 to 7 business days to come back. And what's gonna come back, like we said, are any leads on the properties. So child support, tax liens, mortgages, or mechanics liens, as well as any easements on the properties, the plot map of the properties, any prior deeds. If it's an estate, the estate docs will come with it. If there is a divorce, the separation decree will come with it as well. So it really just depends on what's going on with the property versus what is being pulled. But everything that has to do with the property that is on record will come up in our search.
Now, title companies, it might sound like an easy job, yet you see what they are going through. There's a lot more than just handing over title. They're also cutting checks when the disbursement happens to sometimes 3 or 5 people all the way up to 20 different, 30 different individuals. If there's water and city and all sorts of taxes and all sorts of things.
Relocation companies, you guys in general, and lenders and payoffs and everything on my.
And they're checking all of these different bank accounts. Don't forget your question. They're checking all these different bank accounts, all these different addresses, and they're sending it all over the place. So they have a lot that they're handling for us. It's not just as simple as like, oh, they're just preparing a deed and signing it. Be aware of that. I'll pause right there. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering with regards to the water situation. So at what point, you say you do that for every single deal, or should you be proactive as an agent and say, well, this house kind of seems like that might be an issue later down the line? Like, how do you tell that?
We do it with every single deal.
Okay.
At GM, we do. And I will say this, if you guys, another thing that this is only a GM title thing, we won't, let's say someone doesn't get back to us with water, sewer, their balance, we won't hold the deal up, we can't close because of that. So let's say we close because we can't get a hold of someone, the buyers call and they're like, there's a $400 bill. We'll pay that $400 bill and we'll ask the seller for it. If they don't give it to us, we will put them in collections. So we never want you guys to be responsible for that bill.
There's been other title companies I've had coaching clients come to me that have been in a pickle where they've closed on a deal. Now the title company is refusing to clear it because, like Jade said, it's not a requirement that they check it. It's a problem though, and problems fall upon us. If we're working with GM Title, that problem, they're taking it off our plate for us. So the reason I asked that question though before, like, well, doesn't it just take a day? I've had other agents wait to send out the order. You need to start sending this out right away. Yet there's usually a conflict. Well, Eric, you're using GM Title, but the other agent wanted to use ABC Title. And let's say for whatever reason during negotiations, we went with ABC Title. Whose job is it to send that order? It is still your job. I'm going to continue to repeat that. Everything is your job, regardless of anything. It is your job to make sure this closes, so open that order. Don't wait for the other agent. Just get it started. How do they open an order?
Make sure all the contracts are entered, or, you know, everything is good to go. We have an order entry system, so it usually gets entered in the same day, pretty much property address, buyer, seller information. We will not send our opening documents if we do not have contact information. So every day we don't have contact information is a day longer before we get the process started. Typically though, our turnaround times are, we would like to say 10 business days for a cash deal, and then lender deal 30 to 45 days usually.
Very good. You should write that down if you didn't get that. 10 days for cash deals, 30 to 45 for lender deals. Usually that's a better question on lending deals, how quickly the loan can get done.
Yes.
More than the title company. If they want to open an order though, they would go to gm-title.com. There's an open order.
There's an open orders, or feel free to send them to me. I'll make sure that they get in the right hands. I'll babysit them a little bit, make sure, until we get the process down that, expectations.
Something else that they have to do is a buyer has to now, and you can write this down as part of your Magic 6, is going to be your next item in this is going to be send earnest money. So number 1 was review contract and all your buyer seller checklist. Number 2 was going to be send contract and open the escrow order to the title company. 3 is going to be confirm earnest money receipt. I would actually write it that exact way, confirm earnest money receipt, because you are not sending the earnest money, the buyer is. And if you're on the listing side, you just go, oh, I bet they did that. I don't have to worry about it. We should be checking it. How do we check? We email the title company that is involved. Now, sometimes the brokerage will hold it, but 95% of the time right now it's being held by the title company. What I love about GM Title is that they're one of the only companies I know of that will do what's the 3 initials of home report?
An ACH deposit.
An ACH deposit, thank you. You can go onto their website, gmtitle.com and gm-title.com. If you have, only do this if you're working with them on the deal. You send your earnest, or the buyer sends their earnest money to them through an ACH. Years ago, we would actually go meet with the buyer on their lunch break at the bank to have them pull a check. They would be running late. The bank wouldn't be open in time. There was a problem with the computer system. Now you're running back across town and then driving it over to the title company to go deposit a check. Now you send a link, make your deposit here. No buyers, by the way. I just had a 65-year-old buyer make a deposit who is not tech savvy at all and got it done. So it's a super easy website to use. It is, honestly, that is a huge value proposition to us as realtors. It is so nice to not have to run around and go chase down earnest money checks. That is one of the biggest reasons why realtors end up in realtor jail, is not collecting earnest money. Make it easy. It'll take you 5 minutes, not even, to send that email out.
And now on my business cards on the back, I'll give you guys all of them. I have a QR code. If they scan that, it will take them directly to their earnest money deposit.
Perfect. I bet you if you took a snapshot of that, put it on your phone and in your camera as well, while you're with the buyer, turn your phone around with that photo and say, here's where you put your earnest money. Pretty simple. I always say, make it so easy they don't have to say no. All right. Anything else that you want to talk to us about before we start into day 1 through day 40?
I would say also in regards to earnest money, if you guys do have clients who just feel very uncomfortable depositing online, please refrain from mailing them at this time. Post office is taking about 7 to 10 business days for us to get those. They're getting lost in the mail. It's a mess over there. So if there is a check that needs to be picked up, please let me know. I will come to this office, Rocky River, wherever I need to go to pick it up. But please refrain from mailing at this time.
I've always said that, and if you are going to send something, if it's a buyer that's out of state and they have to mail it or something, do it through FedEx or UPS with a trackable system, period. Because the last place you want to be is your buyer genuinely sent out earnest money. And it's a certified check, something like that, and now it's in between here in Arizona. And you have no idea where it's at, because another seller might be panicking of where did that money go, why is it not there? So again, we're all taken care of if we just do the, if we just take care of the ACH deposit. So I think that's everything I have for you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Next item in the Magic 6 is going to be sending it to the lender. So I guess, Sean, why don't you take this one again? So now we are getting the lender back involved. We're under contract, and Sean is now going to be taking care of that. So what happens now? I'm going to open the order as an agent. I'm going to send you the purchase agreement. And any essential addenda, you can write that down. If there's something like a closing cost credit, if there is something that's negotiated, by the way, I'm not even gonna get there yet. Any essential addenda, is there anything else that you would want?
So we get anything on page 6 that's checked. So ABA is usually checked. We need a copy of that. The walkthrough addendum, the agency disclosure. So pretty much just think of anything you're going to hand to the office.
Do you need the property disclosure?
We do. Yeah. We need that part of the contract, so we do need that as well.
Very good. So anything that is checked off on page 6 of your purchase agreement, I think it's going to be page 5 here soon. Page 5. I think we're changing our contracts on 5 pages. Is that correct, Carrie?
It'll be 6.
It is now going to be 6. I apologize. I know we had a switch there. Yeah, anything on that last page under addenda, we're going to be sending over to Sean.
Keep us in the loop too. Point of sale stuff. A lot of times it's, we're hours before closing, said, oh, you know what, the city came back, we inspected, they don't like the driveways, we're gonna put $1,000 in escrow. That's a big red flag. We're probably gonna be fine with it, but there's a process for it to get approved. Some lenders are not okay with that, so the earlier in the process you bring that up, the better. Whether you're the buying agent or the listing agent, you can't over communicate on those things. So we do the pre-qualification, we do the pre-approval. Eric's customer put in, an offer, and it was up against 22 other bids. It got accepted. Eric will let me know, or buyer may contact me, or I may already be in the loop. I'll reach out to the buyer on Monday and say, hey, congrats. Here, the seller chose you. It's like, I don't watch The Bachelor, but it's kind of like the image of the rose. I've seen that meme before. So my conversation with the buyer is, now that you're under contract, the contract says you have X amount of days to start the application. Most people are looking to get that going right away, especially with the current interest rate climate. The sooner they start their loan, the sooner they can lock in their interest rate. So talk through the numbers and say, okay, if we haven't already hashed these numbers, the previous conversations, we know the price, we know the property, we're going to plug in the taxes, we're going to confirm, hey, you're still good with this much down. Here again are the closing costs, so today, and when we discussed the previous weeks, if I get to the pre-approval with them, here's how much you'll need at closing. I'll remind them that you pay earnest money that goes towards the down payment. You'll pay an appraisal fee that goes towards your closing costs. And of course, you may have some inspection fees, but those are typically the only outlays that the buyer has through the loan process. We discussed with them the rate, terms, payment, everything sounds good, great, perfect, we'll get it locked in. For most customers, we do documents electronically. We still do meet people face to face. Most people don't want to for whatever reason. So we do kind of just like you have the DocuSign system, we've got our version of that as well. Buyer has to sign a consent saying they're willing to sign documents online. Documents follow. It's required within 3 business days. We try and get them out within 24 and 48 hours. Buyer reviews the documents, they sign the documents. Once the documents are signed, we could then collect payment and order the appraisal. FHA, VA, USDA appraisals are required on all transactions. Conventional are required on most. Occasionally we'll get a waiver where an appraisal is not needed. I'll go into detail in some other time on that, but just know that there's some cases where a buyer may not, the loan application may qualify for a waiver and no appraisal being required. In short, that's conventional, 20% down, kind of on a case by case based on what Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac thinks the house is good. Once those documents are signed, we then begin to process the file. And if we don't already have in the file, we will at this point make sure we have pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements, etc. And then we submit the file to process. So the appraisal has been ordered. The appraiser is going to call the listing agent, schedule a time to go inside the house and do that inspection. We usually tell people figure 10 to 14 days for appraisal. Some are a little shorter, some can be longer, but not typically. When the appraisal comes in, I call the borrower, the realtors, everybody's notified as soon as that comes in. The appraisal is only shared with the buyer. We cannot send the appraisal report to the buyer's agent, the listing agent, the seller, etc. While the appraisal is happening, the file is going through process. I have a whole class on the process of a loan application. It's you need your coffee for that one, but we get into just what all is involved, all the steps, everything that kind of happens behind the scenes. But anyway, that's on the title work, survey, the homeowner's insurance, appraiser, employment and credit verifications, asset verifications. Once this is all done, the file is going to the underwriter. The underwriter reviews the loan, approves the loan, says, yep, this loan is approved subject to these conditions. There's always going to be a condition, or almost always. Appraisal, if it's not back yet, homeowner's insurance, maybe we're waiting for a new pay stub, something along those lines. When those items are in, file goes back to the underwriter again for the clear to close. CTC, you see that there's a trillion acronyms in our businesses. CTC is a big one, clear to close. That means lender has issued final approval. The application's ready to get moved to the closing department. We call the title company or email AGM. We're ready to go. I know this loan isn't closing until June 15th, but we're ready when you are. Title company, once they have their file clear on their side, they'll call the buyer, call the sellers, and schedule a time for them to come. The buyer does not meet with the loan officer. The customer and the seller, the buyers and sellers meet with the title company, notary from the title company. We are doing RON, another new acronym, remote online notary. These take 48 hours to set up, where normally we just want 24 hours, but this would be kind of a Zoom closing. These are convenience if you got someone who's traveling or out of town. There's some weird guidelines to it. If you've got two borrowers, they both have to be on the Zoom. You can't have two people in two different locations. But that's something that had been coming for years and years and years. Thanks to COVID, we had no choice as an industry but to implement that. So that's.
Can they be out of the country and use that?
Yes. Yes, and usually when they're out of the country, they have to go to a U.S. consulate, like the embassy. Yeah. So this could be the saving grace for something unplanned, unscheduled, or just uncommunicated.
Yeah.
But they have to get the lender's okay. Make sure if it's a lender deal, check with the lender before the title company.
Got it. Very good. Very good. And how long does it take you from start to finish on your loan to get what we call loan commitment is the date we're looking for, which is more or less the CTC day?
So on the contract, you have loan commitment and then closing. I say if there's no pressure, if everyone is a little wishy-washy about the dates, go with 21 days. That's plenty of time, certainly for us and for not all lenders, but for a lot of lenders. At 30 days close, that's nice, easy, leisurely pace. We tout ourselves as the home of the 21-day close. On a non-fast track loan, someone applied for a mortgage today, June 2nd. We're confident we can close that by June 23rd, as long as the buyer, and I use these two phrases, is qualified and motivated. You'd be shocked with how many people 3 days before closing, we're still chasing them for the most simplest of items. So that's where, us all being on the same team, communicate, and I see Jade smiling. You said these things before, but that's where we get to know each other a little bit, when we're commiserating and scheming on how to get this buyer to pick up the phone and make a quick phone call.
Yes. So does the agent have to do anything during this period once they hand the client off to you?
Communicate, anything being added to the contract, seller credit, point of sale. That's really the main thing, is keep us posted on any changes to the contract, any date changes. I had an agent call me the other day and said, hey, We were at the home inspection and the fiance mentioned about how they were going car shopping. You know about this? I was, yes, actually, we spoke about it. It's for the fiance. They're gonna put in her name. She's down on the loan, so we're in the clear as long as that plan sticks. So you cannot over communicate in this business, in my mind. I mean, believe me, if you know, the biggest of your problems is Sean won't stop calling me, you know, believe me, it's better than the opposite. Likewise, I'm never gonna complain about Eric, you know, oh my God, can I get one more update on this file? It's like, I'm sick of it already. No, there's never a problem from too much communication. It's always under communication. If there's a deal, there's a transaction that we're closing late, not speaking with cross country, but in general, 90% of the time, it's because either the money isn't where it's supposed to be when it was supposed to be, meaning, oh, the down payment isn't in the account just yet, or someone didn't communicate something. Well, what do you mean you switched homeowners insurance companies 2 days before closing? I need to get a new insurance policy. What do you mean this repair wasn't done? What do you mean the point of sale wasn't, re-inspection came back bad 2 weeks ago and now we escrow? That's usually where these things come from, so.
Absolutely. Anything else that we should be aware of?
No, for those on the Zoom, I have some handouts here, just some handy to talk to the loan process, the loan program. So if anybody on there wants to email me, or maybe I'll get a list from Carrie and just send it out to you, just some basic stuff. But the most important thing, myself, Don, Chris, we're a phone call away. My job here, certainly it's to, you know, for my company, they want me to take loans, but my job here, working with the Keller Williams office, is to be your on-site financing expert. So if you're a listing agent on a transaction, the buyer has a loan with Chase, and there's some problems coming up and you're just getting lost in terminology or want some suggestions, call me anytime, anywhere. My wife and kids are used to. They know more about mortgages than the average 9 and 11-year-old because they're hearing these things, you know, on the phone. So don't hesitate to call us. You know, we're always happy to give second opinions or first opinions. So just, you know, keep that in back of mind.
Yeah, Sean's always helping out on, here's a challenge that you can even sort out. I've had him sort out issues that other lenders I gave suggestion to after talking with Sean. They're like, oh, I didn't know that was an option. So feel free to reach out and use his resources.
Yeah, I like solving my problems, but hopefully there's few. If I can solve someone else's, you know, that helps your cause, we're all for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. I think that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much. So we're still again on day one. We have a lot to go here in about 20 minutes, but a lot of it is going to be this upfront work. And we've talked about some things that are taking like that is going to take 3 weeks alone, but we're still on day 0 to day 1 of what we're initiating. So our next part of our Magic 6 that we have is going to be schedule all, and you want to underwrite all inspections. Now, in today's market, we are not doing as many home inspections as normal because it's a competitive market. Most sellers are saying, hey, I'll take an offer for $3,000 less that doesn't have a home inspection than the one that's $3,000 more that has one. They want the certainty of it closing. With that being said, I've watched agents wait until day 5 to get a home inspection. Then the buyer asks them at the home inspection, wait a second, we talked about getting a mold inspection as well. Did you schedule that? And guess what? Now that agent has 2 days to schedule a mold inspection. Good luck with that. We want to get these scheduled right away. Another quick tip to add value to your offers, which is essential in today's market. Call the home inspector while writing the offer and say, can you be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock to do a home inspection? Most home inspectors can, especially in today's market, because home inspectors are down on inspections. There are very few home inspections happening, so they're usually eager to get out there and do it. I'm not saying they're always going to be available, but instead of doing your traditional 7 days for an inspection, do it in 24 hours if your buyer requires one, or 3 days or whatever that home inspector is available to do. Last one, and this is big for all of us that have spoken today, contact the city immediately on the point of sale. Get working on that today. I have so many times an agent comes to me and go, Eric, the city's asking for an occupancy permit. Where do I get that? And if you're 1 day before closing, I'm saying cancel your moving trucks. It's not happening. Call the city's day 0 or day 1 and figure that out. If it's your listing, you should have done that day 0 of your listing, or day -10 of your listing before, you know, at the first consultation of that listing. You need to figure out if there's any point of sale and what has to happen. I know GM Title has a checklist of what cities have them, what they don't, and what cities don't. If I would use that as a good general outline, be aware that cities are changing daily on what their point of sale requirements requirements are. Some are changing to interior only, some are doing exterior only, some are canceling it completely, some are doing no escrow amounts anymore. So it's jumping around. I have for my next note, day 1 through day 40, you're checking your Magic 6 daily. And I also, when Taylor, my assistant, and I go over our pending deals, every time we're done with our Magic 6, we go, if everything's done, we go, if there's something we could do, what would that be? So we figure that out, and we communicate with the client, or we check in with someone, or we make sure that the client is just okay. Hey, you haven't heard from us in a week, wanted to let you know everything's okay. Everything's going according to plan. They want to hear from us, at least communicate in some way, shape, or form to your clients, even during this downtime that the title company and the lender are doing their heavy lifting. Day 1 through day 3, we already talked about this, but the buyer is officially applying for their loan. Day 1 through day 3, they're officially applying for their loan. And in your purchase agreements, a lot of agents go like, oh, there's loan application. Like, I can do that within 2 weeks. No, you should do that within a day or within 3 days according to this. Yet, be aware you can't apply for a loan typically on a Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Try to do things during business hours, not on holidays, so on and so forth. So write that in your contract accordingly. Day 1 through day 7, you're going to schedule and complete the general home inspection. Here's a big tip. Send your property disclosures to the home inspector prior to the home inspection. You think the home inspector would get value from knowing what the seller knows about the house? Yes, if he goes, there's been a leak in the back right corner of the basement every year during heavy rains, that home inspector needs to pay close attention to that area. Don't bring it with you. I mean, you can bring it with you as well, but you want to give that to the home inspector. Some home inspectors will check that ahead of time and actually get prepared, make sure they have moisture meter when they arrive. Something else, if you're doing radon takes 2 days. Tell the home inspector to arrive 2 days early, and then when they leave to schedule that, schedule it 2 days prior to the home inspection. So day 5 is the home inspection, let's say on this one. Day 3, they should drop the radon off. That way at day 5, you have the radon reading when you leave the house. Those extra 2 days, if you go from day 5 to day 7 instead, that buyer's panicking every moment of the day going, what happens if there's radon? What happens if there's radon? And it can cause uncertainty and fear to the buyer. That's unnecessary.
Drop it off before the home inspection, you say?
Drop it off, correct, 2 days prior to the home inspection. Just ask the home inspector to do it. Hey, we're doing radon, can you go there date? Usually they just drop it off when they do the home inspection. But if you're proactive, you just say, hey, why don't you get out there 2 days prior and check with the homeowner or the listing agent and confirm that's okay. But they have to go back and forth twice. May as well make it earlier than later. Anything you can do to get uncertainty out of the transaction, the less stressful your buyer is and the easier your life is. By the way, the biggest reason why earnest money receipts, earnest money is not returned back to a buyer is because a buyer is dragging their feet. A home inspection happens 1 day too late, then they wait 3 days or 4 days to get back to the seller, and then they wait 3 or 4 days to get an estimate on the roof, and all of a sudden 3 weeks have gone by and you still are trying to negotiate the receipt. It's ridiculous. Get it done immediately, as fast as you possibly can. Don't trip over yourself doing it, but get it done quickly, quickly and conveniently, I would say. Let's see, if you are on the listing side, make sure the other buyer has scheduled their home inspection. So I'm texting the other agent. This is still day 1 through day 7 typically. Also, really important, make sure the buyer is prepared to pay the home inspector and let them know who is going to be there, both the listing side and buyer side. Usually buyers are almost always at a home inspection for the full period of the time. Sellers should be aware that they should not be there, and neither should you if you're a listing agent. That buyer needs to feel like they can speak freely at the home inspection, feel like they're at home. Some sellers will go, well, I should be there because, or my realtor should be there because they should protect me during the home inspection. No, we're not there to argue with the home inspector. If you want to scare a buyer away, that's what you do. Tell a home inspector, you're a realtor, you're not an electrician. So, all good. So next one is going to be, let's see, day 1 through day 4, making sure the earnest money is received. We already talked about that a little bit. Day 2 through day 8. Immediately following the inspection, we're going to negotiate the ROC. Remember, this is 3 and 3. So 3 days you have from the last inspection to get the removal of contingency. You can look that up and look for DocuSign. 3 days for the other party to respond. And you go back and forth 3 days, 3 days, 3 days until one, you come to a conclusion, or two, somebody doesn't respond, and that's technically null and void. Usually there's some type of, actually practically every time there's some type of resolution that either those repairs or compensations can't be made, or they will be, or there will be a mutual release. Lastly on this is super important. You should start this underlined. If you negotiate that there is a seller credit of any sort, be sure that you give that to the title company and to the lender. If you negotiate $5,000 off purchase price and you have that signed by both parties, does that mean that magically Jada, the title company, knows to reduce the price by $5,000? No one does. You need to send that to the title company, you need to send that to the lender. So don't forget to update that. Also, what else changes if our purchase price changes? Go for it, Jade.
Escrow letter.
Our escrow letter, our commission changes, we're paid on purchase price. So don't forget to update how much your commission is. Day 9 through day 16, we're going to get our appraisal results. Now, who orders the appraisal? The buyer's lender does. Is the lender allowed to call that appraiser and tell him to get there at a certain time? That lender is not. That lender orders it through a third party. Also, your sellers are going to be immediately when that appraiser walks out the door, that seller goes, "How'd the appraisal go? What did it come in at?" You're not going to know for about a week. So it seems like a long period of time, but the appraiser has to go back in front of their computer, take a couple days to do that. Then it gets sent over to the lender. Then the underwriter has to review it and make sure it's okay. Then the buyer is made aware. Prepare your sellers. Often we do not know what the appraisal came in at. We'll just know if it is okay or not. If it's okay, that's all we need to know. But a lot of times our sellers are going, "Well, Eric, can you just tell us how much the appraisal came in for?" It's not our business, unfortunately, on the listing side. The buyer will get a copy of the appraisal. It's their appraisal to share if they feel like they want to share it. 99.9% of the time, appraisals come in at purchase price. It's magical. I don't know why that happens, but for some reason they must know what the purchase price is on the contract because they see it. Sometimes, especially in today's market, we're seeing them come in low. There's not much you're going to do with that. Usually that's going to be a buyer-seller sacrifice. So the seller has to come down in price, buyer has to come up with more money out of pocket. That's something that I would recommend they speak with Sean about. Tell them, that should be something else in today's climate that the buyer is asking the lender. How much, what does an appraisal gap look like, and how much money would I have to come up with for a $20,000 appraisal gap? The reality is how much money that, whatever Sean told them, it's $20,000 on top of that. It's pretty simple. But make sure they're doing their down payment, their closing costs, and if they need an appraisal gap, they have to understand that's paid on top of those items, not just their down payment. Other things we're looking for in the appraisal result through day 9 through 16, we're looking for condition results. If the condition is bad, we are going to not be able to possibly do a loan. We'll overcome that if that comes up. If you see a house that is in need of deep repair, send it to the lender first and just say, "Hey, Sean, take a look at this. Do you see any red flags here of, I see that there's 4 busted out windows and the electrical pole is ripped down in the backyard. Is that going to be okay?" The answer is going to be no. We're going to have to either escrow for those funds, do some type of renovation loan, or the buyer's going to have to find a different type of financing like cash. Day 4 through day 28, work with the buyer and lender to fulfill loan conditions and obtain loan commitment. So this is not going to be, this isn't just going to be you, this is also going to be this is mainly the buyer. And work with the lender, let the lender know you're available. If you need to kick the buyer in the butt and say, "Hey, send over a copy of your recent pay stub." Prepare your buyers to do a favor for your lenders, and just prepare your buyers that it's going to be frustrating that you have to send over the same bank statement over and over and over. They're going to be asking for things that frustrate buyers, like 10 pages of a bank statement and the last 3 pages are blank. They still need those last 3 pages. It's not their requirement. It is a federal guideline of some sort. Just send it over, please. I don't care that it's blank or not. Just send over the blank pages. They do have like page numbers at the bottom, but they don't state anything. The reason the banks need that is they don't know they see there's 7 out of 10 pages, and they only have 7 out of 10, they don't know that those 8, 9, and 10 are blank. Next one is going to be, let's see here. Did you have a? Okay. Next one, day 1 through day 30, should be asking for referrals from your clients. Probably one of the more important things that you should be thinking about during the transaction. We are a referral-based business. You need to be showing that you're going to go the extra mile, constantly check in, make sure your buyers are happy with you. And I can't tell you how nice it is when you get a referral. There's nothing like somebody calling you and saying, hey, Bill told me to call you and said that you'll take care of my listing. Here's the key to the house. Come meet me tomorrow at 2 o'clock and send me the documents to this email. Like, they don't need a listing presentation. We still do listing presentations with all of them to inform them of what's happening, but it is so nice to work with clients like that versus convincing somebody to work with you. So constantly be asking for referrals. Day 30 through day 33. We're going to be checking on this. You can even do day 1 through day 3. Day 7 through day 33. Check on the ROCs, make sure they're repaired. We don't want to, if there's a staircase that needs to be painted, make sure it's painted ahead of time. Use your head. If it is November and we have freezing weather next week, you can't paint in the freezing weather. We got to get this stuff done this week. Same thing for listings. Get that all done ahead of time, especially if they're FHA. The appraisers are going to note those. Day 35, set expectations for, and you can write this down, utilities, keys, and the biggest one that I see that's missed is mail. We have an automated email that we just send out saying change over your utilities, change over your keys, and don't forget to check your post office to make sure that's taken care of. Huge big one too. If it is a cash deal, what is one thing that's not checked on a deal? One of the things that Sean said he's checking in with is insurance. You want your buyer to buy a house with cash and you never fully get homeowners insurance. And no, it sounds silly. Trust me, especially with larger investors. I've watched larger investors buy. I've watched larger investors. I got a larger investor from another agent because that agent sold him a wrong house. He literally thought he was buying a property that was like 4 doors down from the one he bought. By the way, he fixed it up. 2 years later, somebody came out knocking on his door and said, I need the keys to my house. He's like, what are you talking about? So yeah, that's my house. And he goes, no, check your parcel number. It's 4 doors down. Whoops. Yeah, investors don't always know what they're doing. They might be smart. They might be very savvy with their money. I'm telling you, pay close attention. Make sure that they're getting their insurance. Day 37, make sure all parties are scheduled to sign. Something else like day 30, you could even put day -5 from title transfer. You need to have what's called closing disclosures signed by the lender. That's a good question to the lender, like a week ahead of time. I would put days -7. Are CDs going out in time? If you text that out, that could be a huge help to your client, because if CDs aren't out, we're not closing. What do we have? 3 days, not including Sunday.
If it's e-signing, 3 business days.
3 business days, which Saturday is a business day according to that. So if you're planning on filing on Monday and it's Friday and CDs have not been signed, you're not filing Monday. That's only with a loan. That is a, what's that? Not a Fannie Mae guideline, it's a
CFPB.
Dodd-Frank.
Dodd-Frank, yeah.
Dodd-Frank guidelines, so just make sure that that's ahead. You don't need to really know what closing disclosures are. It's pretty much a quick example of a HUD or a closing statement. Just be aware if CDs are not signed 3 days ahead of time, that's a sign that you will not close on time. So try and get those done a week ahead of time. A lot of lenders are unlike cross-country. They will wait until the last hour on those 3 days and have them sent out. That walks us through all of them, and we are through day 37. We're now filing, we're handing over keys. Another quick note you can write in there, don't forget to talk to your buyers or your sellers if they're leaving town. Before they leave town, get their garage door remotes. Put them in the kitchen counter. The amount of times that sellers are in Florida now with their car and they're like, shoot, I closed the garage door and I forgot that I left that one in the car. That's a good one. You just leave in there. So tell your sellers where to leave keys. Usually that's just leaving them on the kitchen counter, lock them all up. The keys will be in the lockbox. The buyer agent comes over, unlocks it, takes the lockbox off, puts it on the sign in the front yard, and then gives the key to the buyer. You can do closing gifts at that time. Yeah, do a quick walkthrough with, actually, we didn't talk about walkthroughs. Walkthroughs are like day -5 as well. Make sure you walk through the house with the buyer, make sure all the ROC repairs, I guess we talked about that. Make sure all the ROC repairs are done. That is everything. Any questions that we have? I'm gonna check the Zoom and then we are about done. So Gina, you had a question about checklists. So that's we already have our checklist in Dotloop and DocuSign. It's called buyer and seller checklist. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'll type in my email. Feel free to email me any questions you have on that checklist. But yeah, that's in Dotloop or DocuSign. It's already uploaded for you on there. Buyer and seller checklist installed. Any other questions we have? You're welcome, Gina. Then, if that is it, we are all done. Jay, I'm sorry, Carrie, we are recording this. So this is going to be recorded. Are we posting that on our YouTube page or on the KWGM?
YouTube page.
So this will be on our YouTube page. So if you need a refresher, you can look at this one. You can look at the last one we did. Whatever you need. Hopefully this was informative. And that is it. Thanks for coming, everyone.